Hey everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Movie Mates podcast. I am Matthew, joined by my wonderful co-host and best friend.
Callum.
Hey man, great to see you as always. Today's episode, we're back with another Planet of the Apes installment, so part two of three. And I'm just going to pass over to Callum to explain what three movies we're going to be talking about in today's episode. So Callum, off to you, mate.
Yes, so as we've said before, this series is really just an excuse for me to watch the new Andy Serkis films with my brother before he pisses off to England. Today we're still talking the old school Apes films, and a little bit of the 21st century. So we'll be talking about Conquest of the Planet of the Apes, Battle for the Planet of the Apes, and the rebooted 2001 film of Planet of the Apes. Uh, I had very low expectations for today. Those expectations were pretty much met. Uh, you know, I'd heard shit about, I'd heard nothing about Conquest and Battle, but I'd heard some bad things about the redone Planet of the Apes. What were your expectations going in?
Yeah, like I was a huge fan of the original three that we covered in the first episode, and I was very excited just to finish off this five-part franchise with Conquest and Battle. So I was looking forward to them, and then I hadn't heard much of the Tim Burton Mark Wahlberg installment, so I suppose I was looking forward to that. And yeah, I think we both set off pod. We don't have a huge amount to say here. Probably because both of the first two are like an hour and a half, and then the second one is 2 hours, but not it's kind of a repeat of the first film because not a lot happens in it. So there's only
Yeah,
so much I have to say in there, but no,
I would say 80% of all of these films are just a complete retread of the original three.
yeah, yeah,
That they were exceptionally similar. Like there isn't much, new ground mined here. It's nothing new really.
hmm
Uh, and yeah, not a lot happens, and as you said, they are mercifully brief. The first two at least. So
thankfully
I,
so.
I was fairly happy with today's collection of movies.
Yeah, I'm super excited to moving on to the Andy Circus ones because then it really goes up a level from there.
Indeed. So, did you want to hop into the first film for today, which is Conquest
Let's
of
do it,
Planet
mate.
of the Apes?
Let's do it.
So, this film is, the second film that is actually set on present day Earth after we'd obviously seen that in Escape from the Planet of the Apes. And in this film, we have Roddy McDowall returning, but not as Cornelius. This time as a new character, Caesar, who is the child of Cornelius and Zira. So, Matthew, I have a question to ask you, which is sort of seen throughout a lot of media, actors playing their previous characters' children. Do you think it's a cheap gimmick, or do you think it's like a fitting narrative?
It really depends. I think in this film it really works because I love Roddy McDowall. But if we're gonna use like a Riverdale example with like the flashback
I was gonna
episode,
say Riverdale.
it comes off really cringy, but it kind of works and it's a nice little charm. But I don't know. I don't mind it personally, but I can definitely see why some people would find it quite a cheap gimmick, as you said. What's your thoughts on it, Cal?
Yeah, I think it easily can be cheap and just be like, oh, they couldn't, they were too lazy to like cast someone who just looks similar to them. They're like, oh well, who looks the most similar to them themselves? Like it is
Sure.
sort of
Yeah.
an easy cop out. I kind of like Riverdale, not the show, the episode the Midnight Club from season three, because it sort of has this charm of like it's a flashback anyway, so we're sort of just seeing it like through the eyes of certain people. So
Sure.
it doesn't necessarily need to be how they did look, like how
Yeah.
they objectively looked. So it's kind of like a cute narrative technique in
I
that show,
suppose so.
and I think here it definitely 100% works.
Yeah, that's a great point, man. And we've talked before about like exposition here with these films, and I think certainly in Conquest and Battle, there is certainly a lot of exposition. There's blatant exposition just of the previous film alone in the opening 5 minutes here, and there's also exposition like regarding the extinction of cats and dogs, which was previously explained by Zira in the last film. So I kind of felt lazy to me. But that being said, if I don't know why like someone would start off with this film. But like if someone had just started off with this film, I can get why that would be necessary. But for the fourth film in the franchise, I don't think it was necessary personally. But what are your thoughts on it, mate?
Yeah, I definitely agree. There was definitely too much, these movies in the end, just because clearly they're trying to fill a certain runtime without the correct amount of story. And that's definitely seen in, the second film where, they just show the scene from the end of the first film again with
Yes.
such a liberty. And in
hmm
this film, I was watching this at 3:30. in the morning. So I was kind of like, every minute counts, and the first 8 minutes is just like it's just scenes from the third film, and then just like a 4 minute sequence of one of the characters who, like, he is so unnoteworthy. Like, he's the military guerrilla. I didn't even write down his name because honestly I didn't give a single fuck.
Me
But
neither.
like, whatever. I think it was General Aldo. I think, like, there's just a 4 minute sequence of him riding a horse. I
Yeah,
was like, what is this?
yeah,
And it was 3:30 in the morning. I was like, please have mercy on me.
yeah.
Like, if I have to watch this, let it have a story.
I know. Yeah, I know. Especially because we sort of watch movies here on the podcast, like we sort of plan it out how we're gonna watch it. Like this day we'll watch this film, or this today I'll watch two films back to back or whatever. So it as you said, every minute counts here on the podcast.
Yeah. I realized, like, when I said that, like, I was talking about battle, but it was sort of like to just build on the point that, like, both of these films, open with, like,
Yeah. No, I get you. Yeah.
an exceptional amount of exposition. But yeah, the like Conquest opens with the flashback to the third film, and battle opens with sort of that fucking horse riding sequence. That I could just
Painful.
not care less about.
Yeah.
But in this film, I find that there seems to be a fundamental conclusion, a fundamental confusion about what ended the world, because the apes in Escape from the Planet of the Apes never claimed that the apes were the ones to wipe out humans. They made it very clear that humans wiped themselves out, and the apes evolved to become the superior species. So I don't know how the humans are so ignorant as to believe that wiping out the advanced apes would solve their situation. And surely, after witnessing the apes from the future, you wouldn't then risk pissing off the entire species by putting them in slavery.
It's such a
Like,
great point. Yeah.
this film is just such an indictment on the stupidity of humanity, at least from the perspective of this franchise. You know, I don't know that humans would be quite this stupid in these circumstances.
It's
I
such
feel
a
like
great
they
point.
would have enough self awareness to realize, oh, we predict that apes will one day rule the earth, as seen by irrefutable evidence from the future. Let's put the apes into slavery? Question mark.
Yeah,
You
yeah,
know,
as if that would help. Yeah. It's such a great point.
I mean, I guess they think if they sort of like stomp out their individuality, they'll never be able to rise up, but then that sort of just impassions them to do so.
If anything, you should just get them on side. To be honest, you could
Yeah,
like
either get them
form
on side,
governments with
or, like,
them or something.
obviously, like, I wouldn't be in support of this, but I mean, you could just eradicate the species. Like, I would never,
Yeah,
support that, but obviously, the US government in this film are clearly willing to do certainly nefarious things. If you're obviously subjecting all of this entire species to slavery, and then they attempt to kill Caesar near the end of the film. They clearly have no, like, moral boundaries when it comes to, like, preventing the
yeah.
future.
I know. That's a great point, man. It's such a great point.
Also, I mean, it's very obvious, from our audience perspective, that the character of uh, Armando does know Cornelius and Zira, because we saw his interactions with them in the previous film, and he is obviously the one to have raised Caesar in the 20 years between the two films. But the investigators are sort of working on a hunch, and they present Armando with a drawing of Cornelius and a photo of Caesar, and they're like, "Don't you see the resemblance?" I'm like, "One's a drawing, and
Yeah.
it's just a drawing of an ape," and you're like, "Come on,
Come
come
on.
on, they've got to
Put
see
two and two
this."
together. Yeah. I
I'm
know.
like,
Armando,
you're taking the piss.
this I think I had written down here. Something about, and I had sort of mentioned this for Battle of Planet, yes, but I suppose I mentioned it here. Something about these films and weird sort of comedic deaths, kind of deaths out of
Yeah,
nowhere.
this
Like Armando throws himself out a window, and
Matthew. I like, yeah,
yeah,
I'd written the same thing.
like because the film, I don't know about you, Bonnie, but I sort of felt for the first 20 minutes Armando is definitely the main character here without doubt, and then they just kill him off. I was really surprised that he didn't last the entire runtime, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I think it's just that these films sort of, I think they recognize what sort of, like, early Disney films don't, because I've said to you that I don't really, often in Disney films with sort of talking animals, I struggle to empathize with them and, like, place myself in their shoes.
Sure.
Because obviously that's not a character I can relate to, because they're not a human. Uh, and so I think that this film recognizes that in their audience, and then purposely puts like usually like a male adult human character at the forefront, to either be the main character, or sort of the co-lead.
Hmm.
You know, obviously with Taylor, then Brent, and then you know, with the two doctors in Escape. So I think in this film, you know, there was Armando and there was McDonald. You know, so I think sort of with Armando's death, McDonald sort of rises that to that position. So it felt right regardless. But you know, I never felt he was the main character in the way like Taylor was.
Yeah, that's fair enough, man. You know, the character Armando, he kind of reminds me a bit of like Don Johnson, a little bit. And the only film I've seen Don Johnson is like Knives Out, so I sort of thought they looked similar here. But you know, one thing about this film, I think it does quite well, and it is sort of display the levels of like violence and stuff that humanity awfully shows the apes. You know, it's quite horrific to watch in some instances. You know, the torture scene is really uncomfortably brutal. I think when they try to kill Caesar and get the extract his ability to speak from him, and or not extract, but make him speak. And the one thing I did thought was quite silly though was the device that they call the authenticator, which somehow psychologically forces someone to tell the truth, even though they used truth serum in the last film and it worked quite well.
Yeah, I suppose, you know, like truth serum, like sodium pentothal specifically, you know, is it's not 100% accurate. So I suppose, you know, they sought technology, and you know this film is at least set in the future, so you have that
I
sort of
suppose,
sense of
yeah, that's a good point.
you know, stretch of believability. But you know, me and you have been making some very similar points these days. You know, I think we're in a very similar headspace when watching these films. Because I also wrote, which do you find the funnier death out a window, Armando or Mr. Dupont from Riverdale? Like,
Mr. Dupont, just because it's
yeah,
just like he's backing towards it and then just runs out and so quickly.
yeah. I mean, if you haven't seen Mr. Dupont's death, like absolutely watch it. You know, it's obviously it would be a tragic scene if we didn't have the context for that character. But you know, we
Sure.
obviously know that character is a horrible person, so we, you know, we can kind of laugh at it because, like, you know, there's just this air of cringe around Riverdale anyway. But yeah, in this film, you know, I think the death is too abrupt, to be
Oh
like,
yeah.
I think it's too abrupt, and there isn't enough of a reaction for it to be serious and sad. But it's also like filmed so poorly that it's barely anything. So I guess we have to laugh at it. But like,
Yeah, I
you know,
suppose
it's not
so,
like
yeah.
it's not hilarious, but like it is genuinely like awfully filmed. But you know, you've sort of said about the horrific torture scene, and I just liked at the end of it where you know, they intend to kill Caesar, but McDonald has taken out the electricity, and they just look at Caesar on the table and go, "He's dead." Like, what a thorough medical check. Like, well done, sir. You know.
Honestly, but yeah, and then Caesar. Well, I kind of wanted. I suppose I can get into it now. You know, there's a big sort of dilemma towards the end of the film. You know, should Caesar have killed Breck? And I sort of said, I mean, although he ends up doesn't, like I think the film sort of portrays it as if like he is like morally above it, but you know he did kill his torturer, which is probably, you know, fair enough given the circumstances and stuff. But like the film sort of presents it that like Caesar has never killed before, so he shouldn't start now. But then, you know, he's already killed throughout the film, so I thought it was a weird justification for not killing Breck by the end of it. What do you think, bro?
Yeah, you know, sort of the ethos of the ape civilization in these films is like ape should not kill ape, because man has killed man. But you know, they eventually obviously put humans into subjugation as seen in the original Planet of the Apes. So you know, I think if they have, you know, if they have wronged you on such a dramatic scale as to put you into slavery, like I don't think anyone would, you know, question your morals for ending that person's life, because you know, obviously, well, like, you know, in this universe at this point, the you know, America has become like a series of police states, you know, where the police just, you know, make the laws and, you know, enforce the laws.
Sure.
So now that Caesar is, you know, planning to sort of like usurp that role to be the head of this civilization now led by apes, you know, he is going to eventually become the lawmaker. So you
Mm,
know, I suppose like morals and laws are for his, like, you know, or to his whim, you know. So
yeah.
like, you know, I think if he had decided to do that, I don't think anyone would have questioned him.
Yeah, and the sort of theme about Caesar becoming sort of, as you said, like his own judge, jury, and execution in the film, like it's definitely something that it comes up more in Battle of the Planet Apes. So I'm excited to sort of get into it more there as well.
Hmm. And for such like a low scale film, low budget, you know, this was made in the 70s. It was $1.5 million they made it with. which obviously to us is, comparatively very little money to sort of like the hundreds of $1 million, but budget these days. That obviously was a lot back in the day.
True.
For this popular a franchise and this iconic a franchise, that is still somewhat of a shoestring budget even back in the
Hmm.
day.
Yeah.
So for them to have that budget, and have sort of a smaller scale for like the other three quarters of the film, I find the uprising pretty impressive. Like especially the sheer amount of people in ape makeup that they
Oh,
were
absolutely. I had written the
managed to do.
exact same thing, man. The exact same thing. I said, Ape Uprising, it's so powerful. The standoff scene is remarkable. And like you said, like I think the costume design about these films, and this, I don't know if this is going to sound, this is a hot take or whatever, but it sort of made me, I actually prefer the costumes and the CGI presented in the Andy Serkis ones. Something about it. It just, even though the Andy Serkis CGI is some of the best ever, on film, I just think there's something real about the costumes. Like they look fantastic.
Yeah, I mean, obviously we're held up to like 21st century scrutiny. They don't look like real apes, but like that was absolutely the best they could have done then.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think that Andy Serkis's ones sort of at least visually lack the charm
Absolutely,
of
yeah.
these. And we'll sort of talk about whether that's upheld in the 2001 Planet of the Apes. But that I definitely agree with you. Um, I don't know what I was gonna say. It was something to do with
Made that
the
happens to
apes.
me all
Oh
the
no,
time.
yeah, yeah. Obviously we have to applaud the quality of the makeup, but then there are certain scenes where they show real apes, like
Yeah, it's a bit
they bring
jarring.
apes into the sort of reconditioning center and say, oh, send three apes over to impregnate these new intakes, and then they send Caesar off to who will become his wife in the next film, and then the other two off to real apes, and the real apes, like it's such a jarring
It is. It's so jarring.
visual,
Yeah.
because I also find it weird that currently in this film these apes are regular apes who haven't evolved to Caesar's level, and they're also walking around in like prison jumpsuits. Like I don't really understand why that's necessary. If they're
Yeah.
like, Caesar wears clothes because he wants to keep his decency. Because he doesn't because he just views himself as amongst the humans unequal. So it
Sure.
is kind of odd to see when the humans actually don't believe apes are equal, but they're still like dressing them up in prison
Yeah.
jumpsuits.
Yeah. And on that subject, man, I'd sort of thought that we see like just the regular apes. Yeah, like some of them are like hairdressers as well, like which was interesting and stuff. And these films actually made me like go like on to Google and like YouTube and stuff and start researching like can apes like communicate with humans and stuff. And there's been a lot of studies and stuff about it, but I don't know. A lot of apparently is just not true. Apparently, a lot of it is just hokum and stuff. But it's interesting to see, like, if you could communicate with an ape. To be honest with you, like, I think there's like a lot of sign language studies and stuff, but remains to be seen, I suppose.
Yeah, which is very prevalent in Dawn of the Planet of the Apes and War for the Planet of the Apes.
Hmm.
We see a lot of sign language communication. But we'll sort of talk about like the baffling communication in the next film. But Matthew, do you have anything further to say on Conquest of the Planet of the Apes?
Nothing for me, buddy. If you've got nothing else, I'd love to hear your rating for it, mate.
So I think that the film does tread new ground, but in the sense that this film is set entirely on Earth, and it's in no way a time travel story. It's entirely set in this one period. It's just about like sort of an uprising and a freedom of ape rights. So I think that it definitely treads new ground, but it probably wasn't covered before because it's quite dull.
Yeah.
And I think that just all humanity are like next level stupid in this film, beyond comprehension. So I would have to deduct a few points for that. But
Fair.
obviously, there's Roddy McDowall giving an incredible performance. The makeup is stellar as always. So I would give the film a 7 out of 10.
That's great, man. I thought you smashed it there. And for me, yeah, I think Roddy McDowall is fantastic as always. I really like the character of McDonald as well. He actually just seems like a really genuine human character, which was nice. Exposition probably lessens a few points for me as well. And but that being said, I think the ending is the film really gets better as it goes on. So I'd give it an 8.5 out of 10. I'm a big fan of this one actually. Um,
Sometimes I really think I'm being too generous because I'm like, oh, I didn't really enjoy this film. Should I give it like a 4? And then you're like, I didn't really enjoy this film, 8.5.
you know,
Or you know, I really respect it, but it just wasn't a good time. Solid 9.
So
So
10.
I'm just like,
Yeah.
I feel like we're just both generous lads, but I
Maybe.
just view mine as too generous, even when it's like kind of in the pits anyway.
I think I'll look
So
back and certainly think I'm probably too generous as well, for sure. But
yeah, because like whatever I give to like escape or something, I'm sure I was harsh because I'm kind of like, oh no, what I give to Beneath the Planet of the Apes, when I sort of watched these two from the five film saga, when I watched like Conquest and Battle, I was like, these aren't great, but they are definitely better than Beneath the Planet of the Apes, because that is like by far the worst of the five. And I was
yeah.
kind of like, what did I give that? Because I feel like I must have given it a 6.5 or a 7, but it definitely deserves like a 4 because it's just trash.
What one's this? Sorry.
Beneath the Planet of the Apes, with like the nuclear bomb and the
Yeah,
shit.
I had actually.
Brand.
I was actually about to say, out of all the films that we've watched so far, Beneath is probably my favorite, and I can't remember what I had given it, but I think I was. I don't know. I think I had maybe
So
given it.
shit.
I really like it. I don't know. I really enjoyed it. Like the first two, I think for me are definitely the best so far. But
But I mean, like, it's just, the first third is just a retread of the first
I
film.
know.
They've just swapped out Charlton Heston for this new guy Brent. Uh, you know, it has a mind controlling, human cult that lives underground and prays to a bomb, and then it ends with Taylor genociding the entire species, and not following, because there was a post in the Planet Broadcasting Great Mates group on Facebook, and someone had sort of said like, what are some films where where the protagonist is very clearly a bad guy. They're the protagonist and the hero of the story. The quote unquote hero of the story.
Mhm,
They're clearly a piece of shit. And
mhm.
I said Taylor.
Taylor.
I sort of had an exchange, and so someone had said, yeah, he certainly doesn't follow the Prime Directive, and I had to look that up because it's from Star Trek, which I'm not very familiar, but it's basically the idea that when you find an alien species, you leave it alone because you shouldn't put yourself within that species, judge them by your standards. And even though this is an advanced version of Earth, well, a future version of Earth where a certain species has advanced, it's in reality, if you go into the future, that's really an alien planet because it's not the planet that you recognize,
Sure.
and you shouldn't
Sure.
you shouldn't affect their
Great point.
development, and judge them by your standards. So George Taylor, piece of shit.
No, I agree with you. I do agree with you, man. I agree with you. But I suppose shall we move on to our second film of today, Battle? Is it Battle 4 or Battle of the Planet of the Apes?
Battle for the Planet of
Battle
the Apes.
4.
They're all an absolute mouthful, these films.
Yeah, I know.
Uh, I was, I think it's Battle for the Planet of the Apes. Let me see.
Have a wee look at my DVD cover.
Yeah, I have my
Battle
DVD. Yeah, it is
4.
Battle for the Planet of
Yeah.
the Apes. Yeah. It's not great, is it?
You know what? It's not the best one. It's not the best one. I still enjoyed it. But it's certainly not the best one. There's a lot of exposition again. There's a complete recap of the first film again.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah,
and
I
yeah,
did, I did just say like this is one of the only franchises that does like a previously on Planet of the Apes.
really
Like
trilogy,
no
I
film,
suppose, but
like
that
no
that
bound.
works.
Yeah, but that's during the credits, so I think that's excusable. But like this is just like
Previously on Planet of the Apes.
the lawmaker 600 years in the future is talking about this film through flashback, and he's just like reading a fucking scroll as though he's out of Shakespeare. Like it's just bizarre. Like this film should not have a narrator. Like it's completely out of place.
Yeah, no, it's very true. It is very true.
And this society is, basically 10 to 12 years in the future of the last film. And somehow, even though evolution happens over thousands of years, they're saying that in 10 to 12 years, all apes have acquired speech despite not having the biological means to do so. Like clearly, this film is just like in a desperate rush to accelerate the timeline so that it represents a world that, like, these films, like some of them are like wildly unpopular, and clearly this film was just sort of like in a desperate rush to accelerate the timeline so that this represents like a world that we recognize from the first film, so they can be like, see, it's like the
Yeah,
first
yeah,
one.
it's like that one.
See,
Yeah,
see,
yeah, watch it.
you know,
Yeah, exactly. It's just ridiculous. I think that point is ridiculous. Like, even so let's say hypothetically, even if new apes were born in that time and somehow they managed to acquire speech, there are still some apes who were like alive 12 years ago who still couldn't possibly acquire the power of speech. So it's ridiculous.
Yeah, I would say the one that is excusable is Cornelius because he actually has the biological evolution from his father. But even then, he that would be half diluted by his mother.
Hmm.
So even Cornelius, I'm not really excusing.
Hmm.
So that was just baffling to me because obviously, in the Andy Serkis films, they never try to make that a thing. Caesar is born with the power of he's born with the power of speech because his mother was experimented on, so he had the full genes to have the ability to speak. And then he teaches sign language to all the other apes, and apes born after that, some of them can speak or grunt or because they've evolutionarily developed to that point. And
Sure.
that's more that like there's sort of a point in between the first and the second Andy Serkis film where there was a virus throughout the world that killed off however many of the humans, maybe like 90% or something. We sort of just see smaller groups banding against the apes.
Yeah.
That virus may have done something to mutate them, but in
Yeah.
this film they don't really have that excuse.
I know, and that's definitely a point I could maybe look back and criticize the Andy Serkis films for. Like, a virus gives the rest. It seems like they're trying to find an excuse to give the apes the ability to speak or something. But we'll get into that film in the next episode. But this film, it's a very strange film for me. A lot of my points are like, and I actually did really enjoy this, but a lot of it are just like really weird comments about like how a lot of things don't make sense. Like, this film is probably the one that makes the least sense, I think.
Yeah, and I think it's also the laziest because a post-nuclear bomb cult, doesn't that sound familiar, Matthew?
It does sound.
Perhaps to,
What movie
to,
was
to
that? Was
three
that
films
that was
earlier.
the second film? Yeah, it
Yeah,
does sound familiar.
and I was just wondering whether you consider that laziness, or do you think it's to illustrate that like Caesar's placement in the past isn't a good thing, and that like the future that we've seen, in the original films is happening now even sooner because in the previous timeline, without Caesar, the revolution presumably happened hundreds of years later. So, after the apes acquired human speech. So, do you think that this maybe is showing? I mean, this is being way too generous. Like, do you think that this is showing his placement in the timeline as a critique because this is like new.
Accelerated.
Uh, yeah, it's sort of accelerated the timeline because he's been like placed there, even though humans weren't meant to acquire
Mm.
no apes were meant to acquire speech for presumably hundreds of years.
Yeah, it's certainly like we see in sort of the third film. Zira and Cornelia say, "Yeah, we've arrived back from the future, uh, where apes are the dominant species." So in that sense, I guess it's kind of a paradox because Cornelius and Zira were, I suppose, destined to always go back to the past. It's sort of like a Terminator sort of situation where Skynet sent a Terminator back into the past, but then that sort of causes a paradox where you know what I mean? And then
I don't know if that is that here. I think that maybe the timeline that they were living in, the first ape to develop speech was the one in 2600, the lawmaker, who's considered their
okay,
sort of,
yeah,
their scripture person. So I think that maybe there was an like the nuclear fallout happens between movie 4 and movie 5, which we see, but there still hasn't been like a virus or anything that sort of like turns the tables and like makes the humans like devolve and make the the apes evolve. We haven't really seen those tables turn yet. So
sure,
I think that maybe happened hundreds of years down the line, and the lawmaker that they sort of see is like, can I don't know whether he's like their god or more like their Moses who like sort of gives their scriptures. I think he's more like the Moses figure. I think that before they changed the timeline by coming back after the destruction, I think that he was the first ape with
yeah.
speech.
No, that's a great point, man. It's a great point. It does, I suppose, for anyone that's at this point, it might sound confusing, but I 100% know where you're coming
Yeah,
from, man.
we watch so much time travel shit. We're just like, what's even going on? Like, and there's like five possibilities. Of just but do they know this, and did they come back with this knowledge, or do they have this knowledge because they came back in a previous timeline?
Yeah,
But I think
yeah,
that the sequence of events that we see play out, of George Taylor and his mission, and then 2,000 years later it's apes. I think that happened, and then it was changed because of his introduction of space technology and leaving it in the future, and then they went from the future to the past, changed the past, and now they've changed the future.
Yeah, yeah, I get you, man. I get you. And be sure to check out our time travel playlist, guys.
Yeah,
Playlist
it's more
section.
just us like having a breakdown.
It seems crazy to think a month ago we reviewed Palm Springs. Like that feels like last week to me.
Oh, really?
That
Like
was a
that
month
that feels
ago.
like decades ago.
Really?
Yeah, there are
Fair enough.
so many, weird ways that we feel when we watch these films.
Yeah,
I feel like we've been talking about Disney films for maybe 4 years.
yeah. But likewise, it feels like it feels like we reviewed Indiana Jones or Back to the Future last week for me still.
Yeah, I really feel like that. Like, do you also find like the Disney films like painful though? Because
Yeah.
we've done
The next
7
few
out of
episodes
15
though.
episodes.
The
Yeah,
next few episodes.
the next few episodes like are gonna have some absolute bangers. And like the last episode that we covered, which you should check out, part 7. We loved pretty much every film in
I'll
that
be honest
episode.
with you, man.
So
I'll be honest. I
yes,
think episode 7 from this point on it's going to be the changing point because these are sort of like the Renaissance mixed with like modern ones mixed with like childhood nostalgia from like early 2000s. So I think we're sort of going to move into like more consistent good ones. I feel because we've moved past
I
package
definitely
films.
think so.
We've moved past package films. We've moved past sort of um you know I don't really know what to say, like sort of Sword in the Stone, Black Cauldron style fantasy
Yeah.
tales. So hopefully move on to new things and stuff. Oh, it should be good.
Like we have got some definitive stinkers on the way though, like Fantasia
2000,
2000,
yeah. Yeah.
and Dinosaur looks pretty
Oh,
shit.
Dinosaur is one of my favorites of all time. Oh, I
Well,
love
it would
it.
be like you love a good dinosaur, but
I love
it
them.
just looks like trash.
Oh, it's so good. I think you'll enjoy it.
Okay, so back to Battle for the Planet of the Apes.
Yes.
So I would have to say, for Cornelius, the Doctor, Doctor Zira, Caesar, they are all clearly geniuses, masterminds, leaders. Cornelius, the child, can't even string a fucking sentence together to say who killed him. He's absolutely fucking useless.
Yeah. Yeah. I thought I'd said here, what is it with these films and weird deaths that come out of nowhere? Cornelius 2.0 dies after falling off a branch.
Yeah, but also like Aldo's like hacking away at that shit for like 2 full minutes.
Aldo's a fucking
He
idiot.
doesn't think to move to a different branch.
Yeah.
Like we see him, like swinging on the trees like a monkey from Indiana Jones, and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. Of course, Cornelius is an ape. But he seems to have a very very strong swing technique. But he
Sure.
doesn't think maybe I'll just hop out this one.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I agree with you. One thing I want to ask you about this film, do you think Caesar is kind of playing God? Because, in the first film we sort of see he leads the revolution, but from between the events of this film and the previous film and this film, it sort of feels like he's sort of put himself in charge and has sort of made well he must be complicit in making humans sort of do the menial labor across Ape City. So I want to kind of what do you think? Like, do you think it's morally justified that because Caesar's the first one to speak, he sort of puts himself in charge of everyone? I think that's fair.
Yeah, I think people probably like fell in line fairly quickly because he was sort of the one to free them from slavery. But I think that he has sort of put himself in that position to be like, oh, you owe me because I freed you from slavery. But that they should also get to get their own back on the humans if they want to, because they actually experienced slavery, but he was just the one to free them from it.
Sure.
Uh, so I think that they should have the right to punish humans that they know like tortured them.
Hmm.
I don't think to say that I don't think Caesar's the one who gets to say like like which humans they get to kill or will not kill, because that's his consensus that he wants them to live in peace. But now that speaking is just widely done, it's the done thing. Every ape that we see in this film can speak. I think you should reevaluate and probably just appoint the greatest leader. And one like if you're not like prepared for war, you're probably not a good leader. And he's not prepared to have a war really. He's kind of just fumbling about during the last third of the film, like, oh, what do I do? This is crazy.
Yeah.
Whereas
Yeah.
Aldo is kind of like a fanatic, and he's like, oh, kill all the humans. He is also clearly not a fit leader. I feel like with any assessment, they probably would have realized that a lot of them are not the best one for the job.
Yeah, that's a fantastic point, Callum. I think you've smashed it there, bro. And um, no, to be fair, I think the human ape war is really good. Finally some action in this film, because this film is quite dull for most parts of it, to be honest. The character of McDonald, that I'm on my phone for a lot of this film on the Wikipedia,
Yeah.
and I read something that said it's actually McDonald's brother.
Yeah, like because I noticed that they had switched out the actor, uh, and I obviously that well like I keep saying the word obviously I'm annoying myself, but they keep like there's one offhanded reference and like you know the way like you say as a joke like oh yes I know him because like my great granny's uncle's cousin's brother's dog knows him, like that
Yeah,
kind of joke. And that kind of line is said unironically in this film, with one of the sort of the leader of the humans that are living in the destroyed city. He says like, oh yeah, I knew that guy because he was like my boss's PA's brother. And I was like,
what?
what? Like it
Yeah,
was just such a convoluted sentence. I was like, what? But I absolutely did not realize that that was meant to be his brother. I thought that they were just sort of being racist and just being like, yes, switch out the black character, no one will notice.
that's
I
what
thought
I
they were
thought.
pulling
That's
I
what
thought
I
they were
thought.
pulling an Iron Man,
Yeah,
with Terrence Howard, like replacing him with Don Cheadle. Like no one will notice.
yeah.
I thought that's what they were doing.
It kind of
But
reminded me of like
I
the
honestly think that is a much more respectful idea. But I wish that they had been more explicit with that,
yes. No,
so
I
that I
agree.
could have realized that,
Yeah, maybe like
because I sort of just expected the worst from them.
right message, wrong execution sort of thing.
Yeah, I definitely think that is a much better solution than just like a straight switcheroo,
Yeah,
or
or
like a
like
switch out. I think that's a much more respectful decision. But
yeah,
I just wish they'd made that clear.
Terrence
Uh,
Howard, Don Cheadle, or like Professor
yeah,
X's twin brother from The Last Stand or whatever.
like it's just not respectful to like the character. Obviously it's the actor's decision whether they want to stay or return. But I don't think it's respectful to the character to just be like, yeah, switch them out, who cares, no one will notice. Yeah,
Yeah,
I like
I
it
agree with you, man. I
just
agree
seems
with you.
problematic
Yeah,
on a few levels. But despite this being like the last film of the franchise, it provides no more definitive closure than any of the previous films, which kind of makes it clear that their only pursuit was financial, because one or three would have been, a much more fitting ending to the franchise. So they were
hmm
clearly like, how much more money can we get from this? Let's pump out some shit sequels, and then just, oh, this one was so shit that, we're stopping it here with no conclusion.
yeah, yeah. No, I definitely agree with you. And on the subject of sort of, I don't know if I have sort of a point in the ending here. Should I leave it until we move on to that, or can I bring it
Oh,
up?
I have nothing more to say.
What is your opinion? Okay, well, I was going to ask, like, what is your opinion on the significance of like the teardrop and the statue of on the eye of Caesar? Like, what do you think that? Do you think that sort of is like a dark message that this film's trying to present? Because as I said, there's sort of like an absence of closure here.
Well, like there were sort of similar were there sort of similar illusions done by, the underground like mutated humans in Beneath the Planet of the Apes? Weren't
Yeah.
they sort of like using deterrence with like, I think they had like a crying statue and it like rained blood or something, there was fire. So I sort of took no meaning from it. I didn't think to analyze it. But it may just be that, uh like,
Happy ending or sad ending?
maybe like, obviously they fuck my life. Obviously, I'll shut the fuck up now. But in the original Planet of the Apes, they've become more violent. They're fully willing to be, incredibly malicious towards humans, and they haven't exactly like placed them in slavery because they sort of think they're so below them they're not even useful for that.
hmm
So it may just be that Caesar's looking down on the apes further down the line and being like, I'm disappointed in you, and this is just sort of the film's
That's what I sort of
metaphorical
yeah.
way of showing that post death. Like
hmm
how did you view it?
Yeah, I sort of thought, yeah, like it's sort of set up like the future conflict that's presented in sort of the earlier films. Because it's strange, like the timeline of these films is quite confusing. Like some of them technically are prequels, but some of them are like set during present day. Some of them are set in the future. It's so weird. But no, I don't have anything more to say on this film actually, buddy. If you've got nothing else to say, I'd love to hear your rating for this one.
So yeah, this film I would say, but like it's just like a tiny notch above Beneath the Planet of the Apes for me, for worst film in the franchise, because it's not there's nothing objectively terrible about this film. I would have liked, more clarity on the character of McDonald. I would have liked, like the third act is probably the most exciting part of the film, but it's also, you can almost see nothing. Like it's just dust flying and
Yeah,
just like
you
an
could sort
empty
of
gray space.
you could sort of
It's
like
it's incredibly boring to look at.
you could I agree, man. You could sort of like cut and paste that out, that scene, action scene out, and place it in any other Planet of the Apes film, I think.
Yeah, 100%. And I think in all of these five films, like the only thing that you actually like visually marvel at is the makeup. But the entire like I think they blew their entire budget on the makeup and the cast, and then all the setting goes out the window because I think the sets usually look very dreary. And this is meant to be like 10 years after the ape civilization has sort of risen. So I sort of expected more, especially because they're very dexterous. I
Mm.
would have expected more from their ability to build.
Mhm.
But I think this film's fairly dull, fairly uneventful, and it has no closure for the franchise. So I give it a 6.5 out of 10, which I think is generous.
Fair enough, but I respect that. I think you made some fantastic points as always, dude. And for me, I think this film, lazy exposition, weird comedic deaths, lack of clarity with characters. Although that being said, I think the action in it, however brief, it is quite good, and it gets better as it goes on. So I'd probably give it a. I'd give it an 8 out of 10.
Like
So yeah.
you don't need to change your rating just because I mock you for them.
No, no,
If you say like 9 out of 10, I will take the piss. But
no.
like that's your rating.
I had it here. I had the original one, obviously. Oh,
It'll
sorry,
never be worse than you rating Winnie the Pooh 10 out of 10. It'll never be worse
masterpiece.
than that.
I'd written Conquest 8.5, and I'd written this one 8.5, but I do actually prefer Conquest, so I'd have to give this one an 8. So
Fair. Okay. So
it's
now
time
we're
for the
moving on
big
to
one.
an entirely new thing. This is a solo venture. This is a one film franchise, if you will. We see, the reboot. The closest one to compare this to is the original Planet of the Apes. So this was released in 2001. New director Tim Burton, entirely new cast. Thankfully, they don't like try to resurrect the character of George Taylor for the reboot. They're trying to do their own thing, and I
Yeah,
think this is different enough that I was able to really separate it and enjoy it as its own thing. And I think the smartest thing about this film is that they did not even attempt to do CGI apes, because imagine how
thank
shit
God.
that would be. Like,
Thank
have you seen?
God.
I know. Have you seen like Dwayne the Rock Johnson? To give him
Scorpion
his full
King.
title, yeah, the Scorpion King.
I
Like,
love how you called
imagine
him
that.
Dwayne the Rock
Imagine that.
Johnson. I
Yeah,
love it.
like
He
just
needs his
imagine
title.
that quality though. Like in this film, them trying to do fully CGI apes, like that would have been a nightmare.
I think
And
it would have been
I
funny
think it just
though.
would have been embarrassing looking back.
Yeah, I think they actually the ape costumes, they look so similar to the 1968 franchise that it brought back some nostalgia for me. I actually really enjoyed the five films. There's not really a bad one of the bunch in my opinion. And no, I thought the costume design was fantastic. And Mark Wahlberg, I'm not usually a fan of him. I'm not a fan of him here, but he's tolerable. I
Yeah,
think he's okay. He's not bad. He's not.
I also used the word tolerable. No, yeah, because I don't think he's not a good actor in this film. He's not enthusiastic in any way, but he's also in no way unlikable. So I was able to enjoy his performance in this film like astronomically more than almost every other one. I've told you I really like him in Instant Family, where he's with Rose Byrne and Isabella Moner. And that's an excellent film, and I think he's sort of just like okay in it. But that was the first time I was like, he seemed kind of likable in this film. And I've seen Transformers: The Last Night. I've seen the Ted films. I've seen Daddy's Home. And he is sometimes tolerable, but I'm always like, oh, he's just scum though, isn't he? Like he just seems like a bad dude. But like in this film, again, unenthusiastic but not unlikable.
Did you see? I'd agree with you, man. Did you see the caravan of garbage for Transformers: The Last Night yesterday?
I haven't seen it yet, but
There's such a
I
great
like
Mark
I
Wahlberg
went.
montage.
Like I've seen, I saw Transformers like I think it's 2007, was it, with
Yeah,
Shia LaBeouf?
yeah.
And then I saw The Last Night, so I never saw 2, 3, 4.
They're so
So
different.
but I feel like that wouldn't have helped me understand number five any more than
And
I did, other than a bit of insight into the character of Cade Yeager. But I
Cade
saw the film,
Yeager. What a
and
name.
it's genuinely it's the most baffled I've ever been. I was like, how is this a movie? Because it was sort of just like a lot of like long takes of nothing, like set to music, with
The
like
aspect
with
ratio, man, it's so
yeah,
weird.
with the like the worst editing I've ever seen in a film.
Oh, I
Like
agree.
I will make a stand on this right now. I don't understand it. Like I watched it and
I
I
agree.
was like I consider myself a not unintelligent man, but what the fuck is
I
this?
agree. I
I was like,
agree
I don't
completely.
understand.
Yeah, it's definitely the worst. And the thing is, I love the Transformers films. They were a critical part of my childhood. The original one was maybe the most nostalgia I've ever had for a film. I loved it. Second one I love. Third one I love. Fourth one not so much. Just the Mark Wahlberg ones I really don't like. But yeah, it's one of the worst films I've ever seen.
Yeah, like it was genuinely awful. Like the one thing that I kind of I mean this is completely derailed, but like the one thing that I actually kind of enjoyed was sort of the fantasy element where they had like kind of like a Megazord like dragon one that like
Yeah,
Merlin
yeah,
the Merlin
that's cool.
controlled. I found that actually quite interesting. I think sort of if they had said it, and this is sort of like what Bumblebee did, with a period piece. I think if they had done like sort of a fantasy era Transformers film, or even done something like Bumblebee, set even a few decades earlier, that would have been infinitely more interesting than resurrecting Cade Yeager.
Yeah, and I agree. I haven't actually seen Bumblebee yet, but apparently it's quite good.
Yeah, I've only seen I'm not a Transformers fan whatsoever. I've never had any nostalgia for the franchise, but and you love Transformers the movie from the '90s, right?
Love it.
Like that was
So
sort of
good.
the spin-off of the original series. But I've seen the opening sequence of them on Cybertron, and it's them in the last fight of the war, and
Mhm.
it's spectacular. Honestly, like the CGI is like 10 out of
Yeah,
10.
it's
It's
good.
amazing. So I really look forward to covering those with you.
Absolutely, dude. Absolutely. So I suppose back to the Wahlberg Planet of the Apes.
I guess. Uh, I don't understand the fascination with movies, with setting themselves in the near future and like predicting this like laughably, outlandish like developments in technology. Blade Runner, like the original Blade Runner, was set, came out in '84, I believe, and 84 or '82, I think it was '84, and was set in 2019. So that's like 35 years on.
Sure.
So it set itself 35 years in the future, and it was like flying cars,
Yeah.
like these like huge billboards, uh, and I always find I've never understood the fascination, with just making these ridiculous predictions
No, I
because
agree with you,
because
man. I
then
agree with you. It's
it just
risky.
horribly dates your film. Like obviously, fuck on. Anytime you make a film, your intention is to make a classic. You want this to be celebrated for the rest of time. So
True.
I don't know why you would put like such a short distance in the future and then embarrass yourself by being so hideously wrong.
Yeah, I think Back to the Future does it well because it's sort of like an ironic charm because it tries to recreate scenes from the 80s, with the hoverboard and stuff like that and the
Yeah,
car chase. So I think it works there because it's part of the charm. But yeah, with sort of like Blade Runner and obviously this film, I think it does go a way too far. I think, if we were to set a sci-fi film 20 years from this year, there's not a lot I'd probably change, to be honest with you. There's not a huge amount.
you know. I'd probably change like the attitudes of people because as society moves on, every generation, the people interact in a completely different way. Our generation are completely different from the generation before, and so on and so on.
Mhm.
So I would never predict huge advancements. Maybe in phones or something, but I wouldn't think that the technology of the society would fundamentally change. But
Mhm.
yeah, as you said, I think Back to the Future Part Two is done exceptionally well because those films are set in the '80s and then they move into the future and they make it very clear that with minute changes, the future could change drastically. So
Absolutely.
it's presenting like one hypothetical future, whereas when you set a film in the near future, you're presenting that as like the objective course of events.
Yeah, no, I'd agree with you, man. It's a great point. It's a great point. And this
And
film.
yeah,
Go ahead, man. My point was
no,
nothing.
you go ahead.
Honestly, you go ahead. Honestly, go ahead.
Your point was nothing,
It was
Matthew. Like
nothing.
you go ahead. I'm
Uh, I was gonna say, I think this movie, CGI wise, there's some of it, I suppose, but it's used okay. And I think this is only the second live action Tim Burton film I've seen, other than like Alice in Wonderland. I think that's a Tim Burton film, isn't it?
Yeah, there's Alice in Wonderland. I know you haven't seen the Batman films. Uh, Live action wise, there's Edward Scissorhands, which I haven't seen. Uh, there's Dark Shadows, with like Johnny Depp
Oh
as a
yes, I've seen that.
vampire.
Yeah,
I
I've
don't know
seen
if you've
that.
seen that. So what was the other one that you? So like you think you've just seen three, like Dark Shadows, Alice in Wonderland, and this?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, he doesn't have a huge live action filmography.
Yeah.
I feel like his career really would have taken off had he been allowed to pursue that Superman film in the 90s. I don't know if you've heard a lot about that.
I haven't heard a lot about that, mate. No, not at all.
Uh, yeah, so there was this script going around. It was called I think it was Superman Reborn, and then apparently the script was shit, and then Kevin Smith was hired to like do rewrites on it, where he retitled it Superman Lives. So he wrote on that film. He sort of made what he wanted to see from a Superman film, but he had to go through all these checks, with like the higher up producers, and there was this one producer called uh fucking what was his name? It was John. Well, his name was John. And he sort of said that he had a couple issues, like he didn't want to see Superman in his suit. He didn't want to see Superman fly. And he
Is
what
this the
else
one
was
with
it?
Nic
Like
Cage?
there were three issues. Oh, what? Sorry.
Is this the one with Nic Cage, or is that a different thing I'm thinking
This is
of?
the one with Nic Cage. So like this guy, this producer John, said, I don't want to see him in the suit. I don't want to see him fly, and I want him to fight a giant spider at the end. Like Kevin Smith tells this story very well. There's clips on YouTube of him telling the entire story. Basically he went through this whole rigmarole. He wrote this script, and he changed it to have a Thanagarian snare beast, which was this giant spider that Superman would fight at the end. Uh, and that script got taken, and then eventually, Nic Cage was added to the cast. Tim Burton was hired to direct, and then he said, "I'm going to bring in my own people." So the Kevin Smith script was out. Tim Burton was now responsible for the script, and then it just never came to fruition. So Nic Cage had this fantasy of playing Superman like all his life, and he named his child like his child was called Kal-El Coppola. So he
Really?
is like, yeah,
That's
and
cool.
he is the biggest superhero fan you can get, basically, because he named himself Nic Cage after Luke Cage, and then he named his child Kal-El Coppola, and he was one of the few owners of like a really high quality copy of like Action Comics #1, which was then
Wow.
stolen and then recovered and then sold for like $1.5 million, because like Nic Cage is like always in financial trouble for like one reason or another, like because he like makes a great movie, gets a lot of money, pisses it away, makes a terrible movie to like get the paycheck, pays off his debt, then like he gets his Superman comic stolen, pays off more debt when it's recovered. you know I you
Sure.
know he's a strange dude. I would have
I
expected him to
like
be
him.
like rolling in money constantly, but I guess maybe he just isn't great with the finances. I think if Tim Burton had been allowed to be responsible for the first Batman films, to get huge success, and like a new wave of Superman films, starring Nicolas Cage, that were
Hmm.
sort of like weird and dark and interesting, I think he would have. I think he would have been big in like live action films earlier on.
Yeah, like I think Nic Cage is generally one of the more underappreciated actors. Like the Ghost Rider films are generally hilarious. Like they are quite good, but I think he's doing it intentionally funny. I think he's a very self-aware actor.
Yeah, I think it's because just films these days, like he's an inherently ridiculous man, and people are like trying to put him in dramatic roles. But then when you watch him in like Raising Arizona, he's hilarious, and he's clearly at his heart a comedy actor, and they're just not letting that happen. It's kind of like what they did with like Chris Hemsworth and Thor. When the higher ups at Marvel saw Ghostbusters and saw that Chris had like those comedic chops, they decided to like pivot the direction,
Mm,
get Taika Waititi, because they knew that that he was perfectly capable of doing that, and
mhm.
that was a genius decision. And I just think that Nick Cage, like is doing all these terrible films, like that film like Left Behind, where he plays like a pilot or something that was
Yeah,
trashed years ago. Like you just don't see him in anything anymore, anything of quality anyway. And I think if he just committed to a comedy career, he would be rolling in it.
yeah. Like it, and especially uh, in Spider-Man into the Spider-Verse, it's sort of sad that he's just become reduced to voice actor roles, and he's still great in that. Don't get me wrong, But I'd love to see him in more live action projects. I'd love to see him in like a Peanut Butter Falcon style film. Do you know what I mean? I'd love to see him in that sort of
Yeah,
role.
like because in the way that like Matthew McConaughey had the McConaissance and Keanu Reeves had the Keanussance. Like I think we need a Nic Cage
That
version of that
sounds
where he like
yeah,
where he makes like a huge comeback in a new genre because Keanu Reeves is hilarious, but he's realized that he can also do action. After the Matrix, he didn't really like double down on action in the way that he should have. He was just making these like weird project like Speed is considered a good film by some people, but it seems kind of cheesy. But then the Matrix is like so well regarded. I think he should have like doubled down on action, which is now what he's doing with John Wick. So
hmm
I think that's sort of where that came from. And this year in just a few weeks, he's like going back to Bill and Ted. So he's a hilarious guy. So I hope that works out. Because
absolutely.
we'll be talking about it on the pod. Don't you
Very
worry,
soon.
listener.
Yeah,
But
absolutely.
I'm looking forward to seeing like whether he's changed and whether he can still do that, or whether action is the thing for him right now.
Yeah, no, that's a good chat, man. It's a really great chat. It sort of
You're
goes to
like
show, like,
sorry for the description. Yes.
yes, yeah, yeah. I've written down Mr. Dupont, Transformers 5, Tim Burton Superman, and Nic Cage. So I'll try and workshop that wee that wee paragraph.
So we've sort of talked about what we find smart in this film, especially the fact that they used makeup. But what I find the dumbest thing in this film is I feel that having other humans be able to speak English makes it too easy for the character of Leo because it gives him almost no incentive to communicate with the apes. And like, how have the apes convinced themselves that they're more evolved than the humans if they're still capable of speech? Like, how have they said we're above them if they're still capable of
Yeah,
speech and they're good enough to do their slave work but not good enough to be their equal.
it's a great point. It's a great point. Like it's impossible to say you're like evolutionary above this certain species just because you're like they are equal to them, but not they're nowhere above them in any sense of the term. Or sure they're not.
Yeah, because I think there was sort of a dichotomy in the first film where Taylor is like entering this world that he doesn't recognize, but he should recognize the fact that humans in the 2000 years that he hasn't seen have you know have moved down the evolutionary ladder and the apes have moved to it. The in this film, they seem to have just plateaued and now they've like the humans remained at the same place they always have been, and then the apes rose to their level to become equals. So I don't know why in their minds they're now above them. It just really didn't come across in this film.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see if in our society whether like anything rises above humans or anything like that.
I mean, for the sake of humans, in the instance of in the fact that I am one, I
Yeah,
hope not.
yeah.
I
From a
hope
selfish
uh,
standpoint, for me, I wouldn't want anything
yeah,
to
from a
happen.
selfish standpoint, if if certain animals were to acquire speech and rise to our level, I would like to think that humans would welcome that, and be as inclusive as possible,
Yeah,
and because I mean, at least we as a society don't like subjugate animals into slavery, but I'm sure there would be issues, with eating animals and certain certain rights issues would arise, but I don't think that's going to occur in our lifetime.
yeah. Not in our lifetime. Yeah,
But potentially thousands of years down the road, we have no way of saying because I mean, humans haven't been around, for the whole of human history. It was the bacteria, and then it was like the dinosaurs, and then the cavemen, and now humans who have evolved to the modern idea of civilization. So I mean, there's an infinite amount of time for anything to happen. So
absolutely.
down
It
the
is.
road, it's possible, honestly.
It
I
is.
I
Yeah.
don't think anything's gonna happen in 2,000 years.
Yeah.
But millions or billions of years down the road, if there's an extinction level event, and like there was with the dinosaurs, it's perfectly reasonable to believe something else would arise.
Absolutely, for sure, man, for sure. And to be fair, one thing I noticed about this film was it sort of tries to recreate certain aspects of the original the original set of films, but it sort of misses the mark for me a little bit. They bring back Linda Harrison for a little cameo, and then there's a line where one of I think it's Aldo goes, "You damn dirty humans," and it kind of subverts that line from the first one. I thought it
Yeah,
was a bit. I suppose it's part of the charm, but also it was a bit unnecessary. I think if you're bringing Linda Harrison back, bring her back for more than like 30 seconds.
Yeah. Yeah, but like I definitely agree that the line was a bit heavy-handed, but I think when you're trying to refresh a franchise, I kind of understand the renewal of the cast and sort of
Sure.
I
No,
I,
I
I
get that. I
kind of like
respect
the
that.
idea of just paying like respect and tribute to the previous film by having little cameos, and also Theod's father, Zaius, is played by Charlton Heston.
Oh,
And
really?
he
Oh,
sort of has an
cool.
extended sequence where he's actually the one to reveal that humans were there first, really, and that apes weren't always the dominant species,
That's cool.
at least the dominant species in their perspective.
Hmm.
But Tim Roth plays General Thade, and it must really sting for him because to do this film he had to give up playing Professor Snape in the Harry Potter franchise, which
Oh,
then obviously which then went to Alan Rickman. And I can't really picture anyone else in the role,
apart
but
from
just
Alan
that you
Rickman, yeah.
had to actually officially turn that down to be in Planet of the Apes, which I think we'll talk about it at the very end. Obviously, our scores out of 10, but I really like this film, and I think it's perfectly respectable to like turn down a film, but to turn down like the concept of doing a franchise where that you'll have constant work and probably a lot of money if it's successful. This in theory would go on to make further films. They obviously planned a sequel, as clear by the end of the film.
Hmm.
But if you know that you're going into a franchise that already has multiple books, it's kind of almost guaranteed that you will have franchise work.
It's a great point. Yeah, I actually really like Tim Roth as an actor. I think he's really, really talented. And it is sort of sad because I think Alan Rickman as Snape is fantastic, but like it's sort of I suppose like Tim Roth sort of he sort of had projected that that this film would have done really well and would have got a lot of sequels, but it didn't. So it's sort of a luck of the draw, I suppose. Like he still has a very successful career. Obviously, I think he's in Kill Bill, isn't he, or he's in Pulp Fiction or some sort of other Tarantino work.
Oh yeah, he is. He's in Pulp Fiction, I believe, and he's Abomination in The
Hmm.
Incredible Hulk. Yeah, so he has gone on to have a good career, and he's done a lot of TV work recently. But even by the end of the film, and we'll talk about that more specifically, it kind of shuts the door on him returning as a character. I
Hmm.
suppose it depends on your interpretation of the ending, but we will get onto that. But I was really, really hoping that they weren't going to pitch like a potential romance between like the character of Ari, played by Helena Bonham Carter, and Leo, because
Even though they
that's
kiss.
just horrific.
Yeah.
And and then they do kind of like at least like nudge it a little, and go like I think sort of the platonic kiss at the end was sort of to replicate the moment that Zira and
Taylor.
Zira and Taylor share at the end of the
Sure.
first Planet of the Apes film. So I think that was meant to feel like that, but
Sure.
they clearly had more romantic chemistry throughout the entire film than he had with like whatever her name was. Like I think it was like Diana or something.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah. Diana. Yeah.
like
I agree.
they were clearly like flirt like him and Ari were clearly flirting throughout the entire film.
Hmm. Yeah, no, I agree with you. One thing about the script of this film, I think it's there's a lot. I don't know if there's one line here I sort of had commented, and Mark Wahlberg says, "I promise," and he says this to Ari, "I promise I will show you something that will change your world forever." And I was like, "Is that a sexual innuendo?" I don't know.
I mean, glad like thankfully not,
Thankfully,
because
it
it
could
at
be
least turned
taken that
out,
way.
But he takes all of the characters that he's met, throughout the film, to I think yeah, it was mistaken as being called Kalima, but that was really caution animals,
Live animals or something. Yeah.
yeah, caution live animals. That was truncated to be known as Kalima, and then they find the wreckage of the Oberon, which was the big space station at the beginning of the film.
Sure.
And, like the biggest thing that I respect about this film was that by the end of the film, it's very clear that this is an alien planet. He is not on a future version of Earth.
Hmm.
This is and is it's very clearly an alien planet. And I think it would have been very easy to just replicate the twist of the first film, but reveal it earlier on. But to actually just make it an alien planet, I had much more respect for them actually taking that different direction. Because then
Yeah,
it is like up an ape planet. It isn't like a human planet that apes have taken over. But then that's sort of like that sort of even calls into question even more than Taylor why why is why is Leo getting involved? Like it's kind of none of his business because
sure.
in the first one we can sort of empathize with the humans and be like, oh, clearly over time they've moved down the evolutionary ladder and apes have evolved. But in this film we have sort of like no sense of that because these aren't humans; they're humanoid aliens. So we don't have any knowledge of their culture unless it's as we sort of talked about, was the possibility, is it just a parallel version of Earth where it's identical but you know but is
Yeah,
that exactly
I
how
get you.
Earth will be in the future? It's impossible to tell because the film doesn't make that clear.
Hmm. Yeah, I think this film, it is similar to the 1968 franchise, but I think it's different enough to be its own original concept and idea. It changes a lot. And I actually really like the ending, to be honest with you. I think that's how to do a good Planet of the Apes twist. I think this is the twist that no one's talking about, if you know what I mean. General Thade goes to Earth sort of before Leo does. So, like, what are your thoughts on that, man? Did you enjoy it?
Well, I will say that uh, I've often seen the ending of this film listed as like one of the dumbest of all times, yeah, of all time. It is on a lot of like Watch Mojo lists and
Hmm.
listicles, where you read dumbest endings to films of the 21st century or whatever.
Yeah,
And I think it's incredible, honestly.
I agree.
Because it's some of the best like sequel setup I've ever seen. I do find it hard to believe that that Thade was able to get the Oberon operational, but also we like this is going to be difficult to say, but he has come into the past, but like how far in the future did he come into the past? This film sort of makes it seem like immediately after Leo left, he came into the past, went slightly further.
Hmm.
But he may have been released from the Oberon, then developed his own space technology, went through the vortex, went
Sure.
further into the past accidentally. That's probably what happened. I feel that just with seeing the technology, there was Pericles's, like Pericles's craft and the Oberon itself. I feel like he could have pieced together technology to make a spacecraft, then send him through the vortex back even further. But my question is, we see him we see him replacing the Lincoln Memorial. Do you think that he was like? Do you think he went back hundreds of years and he was the Abraham Lincoln, or do you think he's like the Abraham Lincoln, and that Lincoln freed the American slaves? Do you think that he is considered like the ape the ape Lincoln because because he freed the apes from subjugation?
Yeah, I think so. I think he probably went back in time. I don't know. It's hard to say. Did he go back to the Abe Lincoln days and become Abraham Lincoln in a weird
Yeah,
sense?
I mean,
Or
clearly he's dead because it's a memorial, so he
yeah,
has since died, which is what I was sort of saying, that this kind of closes the door on his return.
it's a
So I
pity.
don't really know why Tim Roth would commit to doing this film, because he doesn't really have franchise potential because his villain is kind of, well, I mean, he appears dead, at least, because that is the Lincoln Memorial and it was built after his death. So you would think this was built after Thade's death.
Sure.
But yeah, I think that he probably just went back, a few dozen years, liberated the apes, and then they. But again, there's the issue of how long it takes apes to evolve, because we see them like running around in like police uniforms and like are
Reporters and stuff.
arresting,
Yeah.
arresting Leo at the end, but we don't know if they're capable of speech yet.
Yeah, it's a difficult one. I think it's a really good ambiguous ending. I would have liked to see where it went from here, but it's a pity, man. And I actually really enjoyed it. I think this is a better twist, so to speak, than the original 1968 version.
Yeah, I think that uh, it ends better than the first Planet of the Apes film, and it sets up a sequel much better.
No, I
As seen
agree.
by how terrible Beneath the Planet of the Apes is, in my opinion, at least. I think that a sequel to this film would have been, brilliant. I think it would have been probably the freshest of the franchise since Escape.
No, I'd agree with you, man. I agree. I had a surprisingly good time with this one.
Me too. I obviously saw the runtime and had like an expectation of how boring it was going to be. And, I'd heard it get slated repeatedly. And, Mark Wahlberg, that was obviously already like a point off in my head before seeing it.
Sure.
But, I definitely had a surprisingly good time. but I do feel that these films are probably best served as either political films, like the first film was, or horror films, which I feel like I feel like when they recognized the slavery aspect in the fourth film, that was kind of a horror film, and then that led to a revolt where they're fighting for their ape rights. So I feel like this franchise is best served as those kind of films,
A commentary,
which
so to
is
speak.
why yeah, which is why it's then kind of weird that like almost all of them end with like a generic battle that could, as you said, could just be like completely interchangeable. Like
Yeah.
especially the one in battle could just take place in any of the films.
Yeah, so we see in War of the Planet of the Apes like the commentary and like the Holocaust and stuff, and I would have loved to see it like more in this film, the commentary on slavery, because there's a fantastic line in the fourth film where, or sorry, no, in the fifth film where McDonald goes like, I descended from a family of slaves, and there's that's that's a really powerful line in itself. He is the moral compass of Caesar and the ape. So I'd love to see more of that commentary, and I think these films are very ahead of their time, both socially and just filmmaking wise.
I definitely agree with you. Do you have anything further to say on the film, or would you like to hop into your rating?
So yeah, I'll hop into the rating, buddy. So this film surprised me. Wahlberg's decent. The and the costume design fantastic. Quite action packed, and there's a good wee twist here at the end. And I think it's fresh enough from the original that it stands and as its own project quite nicely. Tim Roth always a delight, so I'd have to give it an 8 out of 10. Man, what would you give it, mate?
Yeah, I have to admit it is overly long, but it has a good cast and good visuals. And despite being a remake, it feels like the freshest since Escape, as I said. So yeah, I have to agree with your consensus and give it an 8 out of 10.
Awesome, man. Also, we're it's sort of sad that we've left behind the original Charlton. Maybe not for you, but for me, I really enjoyed the first five films and this film, obviously. But the first five Charlton Heston ones, it's good that we covered it. Like, I'm glad I watched it, man.
I enjoyed like one, three, and four.
Hmm. Yeah, no. To be fair, yeah, there's some that are better than others for sure, for sure. But I'm really excited to hop into Rise, Dawn, and War. Although strangely, I don't think I'll like them as much as I think I did. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I didn't like War at all really when I first saw it in cinema. I really enjoyed Dawn and I really loved Rise, but I feel like Rise sorry. I feel like
Yeah.
Rise will probably be slightly less appreciated by me after seeing uh, Conquest of the Planet of the Apes because
Hmm.
it seems to lay a lot of groundwork that it sort of picks up on, in the uprising of the apes and sort of the experimentation, less so like the slavery side of it. But, there certainly is the uprise like from the zoo, uh,
Hmm.
like more apes from the zoos,
Hmm.
rising up against humanity.
For sure.
Uh, and I think that like I mean we'll talk about that very soon. But, I think the action set pieces probably make up for the slightly weak plot of Rise.
Absolutely, dude, absolutely. So I
Wait,
suppose
have you seen all three of them?
I've seen all three of them. Yeah.
Nice.
So
That surprised me because like I feel like both of us sometimes whenever we go to see like a big franchise, we're usually like missing like one of them or something.
yeah,
Like you
yeah.
like we mentioned Harry Potter, and I was sort of thinking about Harry Potter the other day. I actually don't know that I've seen all of Order of the Phoenix. I think I've seen like the opening, but I don't know that I've seen all of it.
I've seen all of them apart from Deathly Hallows Part Two. I
Oh
think.
well, we'll definitely be doing an episode sometime soon, so
Absolutely,
you'll
man.
have the chance then.
Absolutely. Like we've covered a lot of franchises, over the last like year of the podcast. So like there's I suppose like there's the big ones like Harry Potter, Star Trek and stuff. But there's not a lot, I suppose, and Ghostbusters maybe, but there's not we've covered I would say a good majority of them. We've done MCU,
Yeah.
DC, Star Wars, Indiana Jones, Back to the Future, all that. So we're making our way through the big hitters rightly. So we are.
Yeah, we've got Rocky coming up soon,
Rocky,
and
yes.
we've got The Godfather, which we'll be talking about soon.
Bill and Ted
That's not a
as
franchise
well.
as such. It's it's a contained trilogy, but that's probably a franchise that I'm looking forward to watching. Even though I'm quite confident I won't like them, but you're a bit more optimistic, aren't you? After
Yeah,
seeing
I'm
sort of
looking.
Goodfellas and stuff.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to watching The Godfather. I'm looking forward to watching the Rocky films as well and the Creed films. So that should be there should be good ones. And then I think for the next episode, is it going to be Disney Part 8?
Should be. I think we'll hopefully be coming out with a couple of mini reviews over the next couple of weeks.
Hopefully so.
There's a new Seth Rogen film out called An American Pickle. I don't know if you've seen any trailers for that, have you?
No, I haven't seen any trailers, man.
Uh, okay, it's about like the I think 19th or 20th century character played by Seth Rogen falls into a pickle brine vat, and then he's like preserved perfectly for 100 years. And when he wakes up, he meets his great grandson played by Seth Rogen. So it's like Seth Rogen playing off himself. And
That's quite
I
good.
didn't delve too much into the plot because I wanted to be surprised. But it's quite a quick film. It's an hour and a half. So I thought if we could maybe talk about that over the next couple of weeks, that could
Absolutely.
be
That sounds
interesting.
quite funny. I'll have to check out the trailer for that for sure, man.
And I'm just thinking, Bill and Ted Face the Music is coming out soon, so that'll probably be our like one of our next new releases covered.
Mm-hmm.
And hopefully, I spoke to our friend Cash, who's been on the podcast for the Kissing Booth, and he said he is fairly free for the next couple of weeks, before he heads back to school. So I think we're going to cover some hopefully terrible Netflix rom-coms,
Perfect
starting
date.
with The Perfect Date. Uh, have you watched the trailer for it or anything?
No,
Because
I've
it
been
is
saving it for
absolute
the
trash.
yeah, I've been
Yeah, yeah,
saving it
go in fresh, go in fresh.
exactly, exactly.
Like the
And
trailer
hopefully,
does spoil the entire plot, so go in fresh. I would recommend that.
yeah, and then hopefully sort of later this month and then earlier next month we'll be doing like Mulan, maybe Tenet. I don't know when that's coming out. That might be cancelled. I can't remember. And then like
It's coming out like August 26th or something.
August 26th. And then I can't remember Black Widow or Wonder Woman. What's happening with that?
Wonder Woman is October and Black Widow is November.
Okay, so we've got a few big. I suppose Wonder Woman and I maybe like Mulan, Wonder Woman, and then Black Widow might be their own projects. Then might be their own podcasts.
Yeah, yeah, I would probably think so. Wonder Woman will hopefully be our. I feel like I know that's quite far in the future, but I feel like that'll probably be our first venture back to the cinema because it's going to be one that is going to stubbornly say like no to being released on digital.
Hmm.
Because we have Mulan, we have An American Pickle, and we have Bill and Ted, which are all being released on like video on demand, like whilst
Sure.
being simultaneously released in some theaters. Tenet, I don't know. They might be. I wish they would move it because I don't know if I feel good about going back to cinema like in August. Like
Yeah.
I don't know how I feel about that really.
Yeah, fair enough, man. Fair enough. But listen, man, thank you very much for introducing me to another three films today. Always a pleasure, man. You made some fantastic points as always. And thank you very much to everyone who has watched this video. Please be sure to like, subscribe, and comment your thoughts on the Planet of the Apes films down below. And stay tuned. Probably next week, maybe probably early next week, maybe later this week for the Andy Serkis trilogy. So thank you very much, guys. Thank you very much, Callum. Take care and bye
And Turlock, if you're listening, I'm getting a haircut today.
bye. Bye.
Bye.